He lived in a small village where life moved slowly. The sun would rise over dusty streets and green fields, painting everything with warm light. Children ran barefoot, chasing one another or helping their families. The air was filled with laughter, the smell of fresh bread from small ovens, and the constant hum of daily life. Among all the kids, one boy stood out, not because of how fast he ran or how strong he was, but because of how his eyes always seemed to be somewhere else, far away in a place no one else could see. He was 12 years old, a curious boy who carried dreams bigger than the tiny village he called home. Every day after finishing his chores, he would sit under the big mango tree near his house, imagining himself in a world full of music. The boy had never had a piano of his own. In fact, he had only seen pictures of one in old books or in small videos that someone from the city had shown him. The black and white keys fascinated him. To him, they were more than instruments. They were doors to another world, a world where sound could speak feelings, hope, and stories that words could never capture. He didn't come from a family of musicians. His parents worked hard, his father in the fields, his mother selling small handmade goods in the local market. Music, especially something as grand as a piano, seemed impossible. Yet every night he would imagine himself playing in front of an audience, the notes flowing from his fingers and the people around him listening in awe. Sometimes he would hum melodies that he had heard on old radios or in village celebrations, imagining how they would sound if he could play them on the piano. School days were tough for him, not because he didn't like learning, but because his mind was always somewhere else. While others were busy with lessons, he would quietly sketch the shapes of pianos in his notebook or scribble down notes of imaginary songs. Some classmates would laugh at him for staring into space, but he didn't mind. He knew that dreams sometimes needed patience and silence before they could grow. One morning, the village awoke with unusual excitement. A popular band from the city was coming to perform at the festival that happened once every year. Word spread quickly. Children ran from house to house. Merchants shouted about the performance, and even the elders walked a little faster, curious about the visitors. The boy felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. He had never been to such a big event. A band performing in his village felt like something from the stories he had heard about cities far away. He woke early that day, the sun barely touching the horizon, and ran outside. The streets were crowded with people preparing for the festival. Stalls were being set up, colorful fabrics were being hung, and the smell of grilled corn and roasted peanuts filled the air. His heart raced not because of the crowds or the food, but because of what he hoped to see, the piano. He had heard that the band would have a piano on stage. Just the thought of seeing one in real life made him feel like his dreams were one step closer. As he walked, he imagined himself sitting at the grand instrument, fingers trembling at first but then finding their rhythm. He imagined the notes echoing through the village, soft at first, then louder, carrying joy and magic everywhere. When the performance started, he found a small spot near the stage. From here, he could see the musicians clearly. The drummer was loud and energetic, the guitarist moved with confidence, and the singer's voice carried over the crowd, warm and inviting. And there it was, the piano. It sat at the side of the stage, shining under the sunlight, black and glossy as if it was calling out to him. The boy's chest tightened with emotion. He wanted to run up and touch it, but he stayed where he was, afraid that someone might laugh or push him away. He watched the hands of the pianist glide across the keys, and something stirred deep inside him, a mixture of awe, longing, and determination. Each note seemed to speak directly to him, saying, "You can do this too." As the band played, he noticed small things that most people didn't see. The way the pianist's fingers curved, how they barely touched the keys yet made such beautiful sounds. The way the audience reacted, some swaying gently, others closing their eyes to feel the music. He imagined himself in that spot, seeing the faces of the listeners light up as he played. After a while, the band took a break, and the crowd scattered to get drinks or snacks. The boy stayed near the piano, hesitant, but he couldn't resist the temptation to get closer. He ran his fingers over the cold, smooth keys, careful not to press too hard. A soft sound escaped, almost like a whisper. He smiled, feeling a thrill he had never felt before. It was real. He was touching a piano, something he had only dreamed of until now. A few adults passing by noticed him and chuckled. "Careful, little one," someone said. "That's not a toy," but he only nodded, too focused on the keys to pay much attention. He imagined that the piano was waiting for him, inviting him to play. He spent the next hour observing the band. He watched how they communicated without words, how their music flowed naturally, how the pianist seemed to know exactly where each note should go. The boy tried to memorize every detail, the posture, the hand movements, the way the pianist smiled when a note sounded perfect. He told himself that one day he would do the same. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the stage. The crowd started to thin, but the boy stayed put, sitting quietly, imagining the songs he could play. He thought about asking the band if he could try. His heart raced at the idea. What if they laughed at him? What if he failed? But then he remembered the joy he had felt when he first touched the keys. That feeling was worth more than any embarrassment. He took a deep breath, closing his eyes for a moment, and imagined himself playing in front of everyone. He felt the music in his chest, like it was already a part of him. And then, with a small but determined voice, he decided that he would ask. As the band packed their instruments for the night, the boy walked closer. He watched them carefully, waiting for the right moment. His hands were sweaty and his heart pounded loudly. He imagined all the possible ways they could react, from kind encouragement to dismissive laughter. But he told himself he had nothing to lose. He had to try. The first thing he noticed was the drummer, who smiled at him when their eyes met. That small smile gave him courage. Then he saw the pianist, a tall man with kind eyes, putting the sheet music away. The boy swallowed hard, his throat dry, and stepped forward. His legs shook, but he didn't stop. When he reached the front, he spoke as clearly as he could. "Excuse me, sir, may I try the piano?" His voice was small, almost lost among the band's chatter and the few remaining festival-goers. The band members looked at each other, a mixture of surprise and amusement on their faces. A 12-year-old asking to play their piano? It was unusual, maybe even bold. For a few moments there was silence. The boy felt his stomach twist with nervousness. Had he made a mistake? Should he have stayed in the crowd, dreaming quietly under the mango tree? Then the pianist knelt down slightly, looking the boy in the eye. "You want to try?" he asked, his voice gentle but curious. The boy nodded, unable to speak for a second. He could hardly believe what was happening. The doors to his dream were opening just a little, and it was real. The band exchanged quick glances, whispers between them, deciding whether to say yes. Finally, the drummer gave a nod and the guitarist shrugged with a smile. The pianist stood and gestured toward the piano. "All right," he said. "Let's see what you've got." The boy's heart leaped. He took careful steps to the piano, each one feeling heavier than the last. He sat down on the bench, his hands hovering over the keys, trembling. The black and white tiles looked so different in real life than they had in the pictures. They were cold and smooth under his fingers, yet somehow inviting, like old friends waiting for him. He pressed one key lightly, then another. A soft, uncertain sound emerged, but it felt magical. His fingers danced over a few more notes, clumsy but hopeful. He couldn't believe he was actually doing it. The pianist leaned closer, smiling, watching the boy find his way. The drummer and guitarist stood nearby, curious and quietly encouraging. For the boy, time slowed. The festival sounds, the chatter, the smells, they all faded away. All that existed was him, the piano, and the music forming in his heart. He realized that this was more than just a dream. It was a chance to touch it, feel it, and be part of it. As the sun finally dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, he kept playing, small notes at first, building confidence with each one. A tiny audience began to gather, some children, a few adults, all drawn by the courage and passion of this small boy with a huge heart. That day, under the fading sunlight, he discovered something important. Dreams weren't just wishes. They were courage waiting to be acted upon, and sometimes taking a single bold step, asking for one chance, could bring a dream closer than you ever imagined. The boy looked up at the band members, whose expressions were softening, their eyes filled with curiosity and surprise. And he realized that this was only the beginning. A 12-year-old boy from a small village had dared to ask, and the world had said, maybe. And for him, that maybe was enough to keep the music alive in his heart forever. The boy sat at the piano, his hands hovering over the keys. His heart raced faster than ever before, and every nerve in his body felt alive. The band members watched quietly, their curiosity growing. No one had expected a 12-year-old to have the courage to ask to play. It was unusual, even bold, and they didn't know what to expect. For a moment there was silence. The boy took a deep breath and tried to steady his trembling fingers. He looked up at the pianist, who gave him a small nod, a silent encouragement that made him feel braver. The drummer leaned against his kit, watching carefully, and the guitarist adjusted his guitar strap, clearly interested but still unsure. The boy's stomach twisted with nerves. He felt tiny, a small figure in front of a stage and a piano that seemed enormous. He pressed a single key. The sound rang out soft and uncertain, but it was enough to make him smile. It was real. He was making music. He tried another note, then a few more, each one shaky but growing steadier. The pianist leaned closer, watching his fingers. "Don't worry about mistakes," he said kindly. "Just feel the music." The boy nodded, even though his hands were shaking. He tried to imagine the music flowing from him, as if the piano was not an object but a part of him. He closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the sound, letting it guide him. He pressed the keys more confidently, and the notes began to form a small, simple melody. It wasn't perfect, but it was music, and that was enough. Some of the crowd, a few children and adults lingering after the festival, had gathered near the stage. They watched quietly, unsure of what to make of the boy. Some whispered to each other, wondering if he would succeed. Some smiled, seeing the courage it took for him to ask. The boy noticed them only briefly. His attention was on the keys, on the feel of the notes under his fingers. The pianist stepped back a little, allowing him more space. "Keep going," he said softly. "Play what you feel." The boy nodded again and continued. His hands moved more confidently now, each note giving him a little more courage. He was clumsy at times, hitting wrong notes, but he didn't stop. Each mistake was just another sound, another chance to learn. The drummer and guitarist began to relax, watching with interest. The boy could feel their eyes on him, but it didn't scare him as much now. Instead, it made him want to try harder. He imagined that the audience was listening just to him, that every note mattered. He remembered all the nights he had spent under the mango tree, imagining this very moment, and it gave him strength. Then something unexpected happened. The pianist, still standing nearby, started to play a soft chord alongside the boy's notes, subtly guiding him without taking over. The drummer tapped a gentle rhythm on his snare drum, careful not to overwhelm the boy. Even the guitarist joined, strumming quietly in the background. It was a slow, cautious accompaniment, but it felt magical. The boy felt a surge of excitement and joy. For the first time, he wasn't alone. He was part of something bigger, a real band playing real music with real people listening. The notes he played weren't just sounds anymore. They were part of a story he was creating right now. His fingers moved faster, more confidently, and the melody grew. The crowd began to notice the change. They leaned closer, some whispering to each other, amazed at the sight. A small group of children clapped quietly, encouraging him. The adults watched with soft smiles, impressed by the courage and determination of the boy. No one laughed or mocked him. Instead, they were witnessing something rare. A young dreamer stepping boldly into a world that many thought was far beyond his reach. The boy's mind was racing. He remembered all the times he had been told he couldn't do something, all the times people had laughed at his daydreams. But none of that mattered now. Here in front of the piano, he felt alive. He felt powerful in a way he had never known before. Each note was a triumph, each melody a step closer to the dream he had carried quietly in his heart for years. As he played, he began to experiment. He pressed keys in ways he had never tried before, testing different combinations of sounds. Some were harsh, some were soft, but all of them were music. The pianist nodded approvingly, tapping the edge of the piano, encouraging him to keep exploring. The drummer added gentle beats, and the guitarist followed, creating a simple harmony that lifted the boy's confidence even more. After a while, the boy realized he was smiling without thinking. His nervousness was fading, replaced by pure joy. Music was no longer something distant or impossible. It was in his hands, in his heart, and all around him. The audience, still small but growing, could sense it too. They watched, fascinated by the young boy who dared to step forward and try something that seemed impossible. Then, a moment came that the boy would never forget. He hit a sequence of notes that sounded surprisingly good together. It was not perfect, not polished, but it was beautiful in its own way. The pianist's eyes widened slightly. The drummer paused to listen, and even the guitarist stopped strumming for a moment. The boy felt a rush of excitement. He was making real music, something that could make people stop and listen. The crowd reacted almost immediately. A soft murmur of surprise ran through them, followed by quiet applause. Some of the children cheered softly, while a few adults nodded with admiration. The boy felt a surge of pride but also a little disbelief. Was this really happening? Was he really playing a piano in front of a band and an audience? It felt like a dream, but it was real, and that made it even more magical. The pianist leaned closer again, offering a small piece of advice. "Try to feel the rhythm, not just the notes," he said kindly. "Listen to the music inside you." The boy nodded, understanding immediately. It was more than just pressing keys. It was about letting the music flow through him. He tried again, this time listening to the beat in his chest, the rhythm in the air, and the sounds around him. The notes became smoother, the melody more natural. The drummer added a soft but steady beat, helping the boy keep time. The guitarist followed, creating a simple chord progression that complemented the melody. Together they created something beautiful, not perfect, not polished, but alive. The boy felt a connection he had never known before, not just to the music, but to the people around him. The band was no longer distant or intimidating. They were partners guiding and supporting him. For the boy, time seemed to stretch. Minutes felt like hours, and every note was a small victory. He forgot about the crowd, the sun setting behind him, even the fatigue in his arms. All that mattered was the music and the way it made him feel. He was not just a boy in a village anymore. He was a musician, creating something that could touch hearts. The band members exchanged smiles. They were impressed, not just by the boy's courage, but by his instinctive sense of melody. He had no formal training, yet he played with emotion, with feeling, and with a natural understanding of rhythm. It was rare to see someone so young approach music with such honesty and fearlessness. After several minutes, the boy paused, taking a deep breath. His hands were slightly sore, but his heart was full. He looked up at the band, unsure what to expect. Would they praise him? Would they laugh at his mistakes? To his relief, the pianist smiled warmly. "You have talent," he said simply. "Keep playing. Don't let anyone tell you you can't." The drummer nodded, clapping softly, and the guitarist smiled, giving him a thumbs up. The boy felt a surge of gratitude. He had taken a huge risk asking to play, and it had paid off. He realized something important. Courage mattered more than skill at first. Taking the step, asking for a chance, and daring to try had opened a door that might have remained closed forever. The crowd, now more attentive, began to clap and cheer softly. Some adults whispered to each other about the boy's bravery, while children tried to copy his confident posture, inspired by his boldness. The boy smiled shyly, feeling proud but also a little embarrassed by the attention. He was not used to being in the spotlight, but he liked it. He liked the way music could bring people together, make them feel something, even if just for a moment. As the evening sky turned deep orange and purple, the boy continued to play, experimenting with new sounds and rhythms. The band stayed close, offering guidance, encouragement, and subtle accompaniment. Together they created a small, magical moment, a boy and a band sharing music in a way that no one in the village would forget. In that moment, the boy understood something he had never realized before. Music was not just about talent. It was about heart, courage, and connection. It was about daring to dream, daring to ask, and daring to try. And for a 12-year-old boy from a small village, it was a lesson that would stay with him forever. The sun disappeared completely behind the horizon, leaving the village bathed in the soft glow of evening lights. The boy finally stopped playing, breathing heavily but smiling widely. The band members clapped, the audience cheered, and the boy felt a warmth spread through him that had nothing to do with the sun or the crowd. It was the warmth of knowing that he had dared, that he had tried, and that he had found a place in the music he loved so much. The boy sat on the piano bench, staring at the keys in front of him. His hands felt heavy, but his heart was lighter than it had ever been. The crowd was watching him quietly, the band standing a few steps away, ready to guide him if needed. He had played a little before, just a few notes and short melodies, but now it was time to try something more. He wanted to play a real song, or at least something that sounded like one. He took a deep breath and placed his fingers carefully on the keys. His fingers trembled slightly, but he tried to ignore it. He pressed the first note, and it sounded soft and hesitant. Then another note followed, and a few more. For a moment, it was like the piano was a puzzle he had never solved before. Some keys made sounds he didn't expect, some combinations didn't feel right, and a few notes sounded wrong. He frowned but didn't stop. He reminded himself that mistakes were part of learning. The band members watched closely. The pianist leaned a little forward, offering a gentle nod of encouragement. The drummer tapped quietly on the snare, providing a soft rhythm. Even the guitarist strummed some light chords to fill the spaces. It was like they were saying without words, "Keep going, we're here with you." That support gave the boy courage to continue even when he hit wrong notes or lost his place. The first few minutes were awkward. The boy pressed wrong keys, hesitated, and sometimes his fingers moved too slowly. The sound was clumsy, not smooth, and the notes didn't form a clear melody. He felt a little discouraged. Doubts crept in. Maybe he wasn't good enough. Maybe the band had made a mistake by letting him play. Maybe everyone would laugh. But then he remembered something important. He remembered all the nights under the mango tree, dreaming of this very moment. He remembered how it had felt when he first touched the piano and heard even a single note. He remembered the courage it took to walk up and ask. And with that memory, he decided to try again, not worrying about mistakes. This time he pressed the keys slowly, paying attention to each sound. Some notes were off, some were right, and a few sounded better than he had expected. The drummer adjusted the rhythm slightly, keeping it gentle so it didn't overwhelm the boy. The guitarist added a simple chord here and there. The pianist leaned in, smiling quietly, showing the boy that it was okay to take his time. The boy closed his eyes for a moment. He could feel the music inside him like a small flame waiting to grow. He pressed a series of keys, experimenting with the sounds, trying to create a pattern that felt right. Some of the notes clashed, but others blended beautifully. Slowly, a simple melody began to emerge, shaky but recognizable. The boy's heart lifted. He was creating something, even if it wasn't perfect. The crowd, still small but attentive, began to lean forward, listening more closely. They could feel the effort and determination in every note. Some children whispered, excitedly to each other, pointing at the boy and nodding with admiration. A few adults smiled, impressed by his courage. There was no laughter, no mocking, just quiet support and curiosity. The boy noticed their attention, but he didn't let it distract him. Instead, he used it as motivation to keep going. As he played, he began to notice something amazing. Even when he hit a wrong note, it didn't ruin the music. The sound blended in a little strangely at first, but then it could be turned into something interesting. He realized that mistakes weren't the enemy. They were opportunities to create something new. Each wrong note became a challenge, a way to learn and improve. Encouraged, the boy started to play with more confidence. He tried combining keys in different ways, pressing some softly, others more firmly. He discovered that some sequences of notes sounded better than he had imagined. A few times he even surprised himself with melodies that came naturally without thinking. The piano, once so intimidating, began to feel like a friend, responding to his curiosity and creativity. The band members watched with growing admiration. The pianist leaned on the edge of the piano, smiling quietly. The drummer kept a gentle rhythm, careful not to overshadow the boy. The guitarist played light chords, adding harmony where it felt right. Together, they created a supportive environment, like scaffolding for a young tree learning to grow. After a few minutes, the boy realized he had found a rhythm. It wasn't perfect, but it was steady. He pressed keys with more confidence, moving his fingers faster, experimenting with short sequences of notes. He felt the music moving through him, like a river flowing. Each note connected to the next, creating patterns that were simple but pleasing. The melody grew, and for the first time, he felt proud of what he was creating. Suddenly, a small challenge came. He attempted a sequence that seemed easy in his imagination, but his fingers stumbled. He hit the wrong keys, producing a sound that was harsh and jarring. He froze, frustrated. The crowd noticed, a few whispering softly. The boy wanted to stop, to give up, but he remembered the pianist's words. Feel the music. Don't worry about mistakes. He took a deep breath, relaxed his shoulders, and tried again. This time he focused on the feel of the keys, letting the rhythm in his chest guide him. Slowly the notes fell into place. The sequence that had seemed impossible before now sounded surprisingly good. The boy's face lit up with excitement. He realized that perseverance mattered more than perfection. Every mistake was just a step toward success. The audience began to react more openly. A few children clapped softly when the boy hit a sequence correctly. Some adults nodded, smiling, impressed by his determination. The boy noticed their encouragement, but he didn't let it distract him. Instead, it fueled him to try harder, to explore more sounds, to see how far he could go. Encouraged, he began to experiment further. He pressed keys faster, tried combining high and low notes, and discovered new sequences that sounded surprisingly harmonious. He learned to adjust the pressure on the keys, creating softer sounds or louder ones. The piano began to respond to him, almost as if it understood his intentions. The boy felt a sense of connection, like the instrument and he were partners in creating music. The band members exchanged glances, impressed by the boy's progress. The pianist gave a small thumbs up, the drummer tapped a slightly livelier rhythm, and the guitarist played more confidently. They were no longer just observers, they were collaborators, helping the boy explore his potential while letting him take the lead. Time passed quickly. The sun had set completely, leaving the stage bathed in soft artificial lights. The boy's fingers were tired, but he barely noticed. He was lost in the music, completely absorbed in the act of creating. Each note brought a new sense of joy, each melody a small triumph. He had gone from hesitation and fear to confidence and curiosity, all in a matter of minutes. Then came a moment of silence. The boy realized he had played a small sequence that sounded surprisingly good, flowing naturally from start to finish. It wasn't perfect, but it was beautiful in its own raw, untrained way. He paused, catching his breath, and looked up at the band. The pianist's eyes were bright with admiration. The drummer smiled, and the guitarist nodded approvingly. The boy felt a warmth in his chest, a mix of pride, relief, and happiness. The crowd reacted quietly at first, then more noticeably. Soft applause and cheers filled the air. Some children clapped excitedly, while a few adults whispered to each other about the boy's courage and talent. The boy smiled shyly, feeling both proud and a little embarrassed. He wasn't used to this attention, but he liked it. He liked knowing that his music, his effort, was being recognized. Encouraged, he tried another sequence, this time blending notes he had played successfully before with new combinations. He pressed keys with more confidence, letting his imagination guide him. The melody grew richer, more expressive. The piano, once intimidating, now felt like an extension of himself. The boy realized that playing music was not just about pressing the right keys. It was about expressing feelings, telling a story, and sharing a part of himself. The band members stayed close, guiding subtly but letting him take the lead. They provided rhythm, harmony, and encouragement, but the music was his. For the first time, the boy felt like a real musician, not just a dreamer. The piano was no longer a distant object of fascination. It was a friend, a companion in his journey. By the end of the evening, the boy had played for a long time. His fingers were sore, but his heart was full. He had stumbled, made mistakes, and hesitated, yet he had persevered. He had created melodies, explored sounds, and discovered the joy of music. The crowd had noticed, and the band had been impressed. For the boy, this was a triumph far greater than any applause. It was the proof that courage, effort, and persistence could turn a dream into reality. As he stepped away from the piano, the pianist knelt down and said, "You have something special. Keep playing, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The boy nodded, his heart swelling with gratitude and pride. He had faced fear, embraced mistakes, and discovered the magic of music in a way he would never forget. That night, as the boy walked home under the starlit sky, he carried more than the memory of playing a piano. He carried confidence, hope, and a new understanding. that dreams were not just wishes but something you built with courage and effort. And for the boy, this was only the beginning. The boy had been playing for some time now. His fingers were sore, his palms slightly sweaty, but he didn't stop. Every note he played felt like a small victory. The band members were watching him closely, offering gentle guidance and subtle encouragement. The crowd, though small, had grown more attentive, sensing something special unfolding. For the boy, the piano was no longer a strange, intimidating object. It had become a partner, a companion that responded to his every thought, every feeling. He pressed a key and held it, listening carefully to the sound as it lingered in the air. Then another note followed, and soon a sequence of notes emerged that surprised him. They weren't just random sounds anymore, they were forming a melody, a tune that seemed to flow naturally from his heart. His eyes widened in disbelief. Could he really be creating something beautiful? Could these notes coming from a boy who had never had lessons sound like this? The pianist leaned closer, his expression softening. He didn't speak at first, only watching, letting the boy feel his own music. The drummer and guitarist stayed close, offering rhythm and harmony when needed. But it was the boy's melody, the one he had discovered in the midst of mistakes and experimentation. It was raw, unpolished, but it had life. It had feeling. The boy's heart raced as he continued to play. Each note seemed to build on the last, creating patterns he had never imagined. The melody grew more confident, more expressive, and he began to feel something extraordinary. A connection not just to the piano, but to the music itself. It was as if the piano had been waiting for him, and now it was speaking, telling him stories, revealing emotions, and sharing joy he hadn't known he could feel. The crowd began to react. At first it was subtle. People leaned forward, curious, listening more closely. Then a soft murmur of admiration spread, and a few children clapped quietly. The adults watched in awe, realizing that this young boy who had walked up timidly just hours before was now creating a melody that captured attention and hearts. There was no doubt something magical was happening. The boy didn't notice the crowd. He was too absorbed in the music. His fingers moved almost instinctively, guided by the rhythm in his chest and the melody in his mind. The notes flowed faster now, but they were precise. He combined sequences he had tried before with new ideas, blending them into something unique. He could feel the music, not just hear it. Every chord, every note carried emotion, hope, joy, wonder. For a brief moment he faltered. He hit a wrong note and froze, unsure of what to do next. The silence felt heavy, and a small wave of fear washed over him. What if he ruined the moment? What if everyone laughed? But then he remembered the encouragement of the band, the gentle rhythm of the drummer, the chords from the guitarist, and the soft nod from the pianist. He realized mistakes weren't the end. They were just part of the music. He smiled to himself and pressed on. Then it happened. The boy pressed a combination of keys, a melody he hadn't tried before, and it worked. The notes flowed beautifully, like a river, smooth and full of feeling. The sound filled the space around him, reaching the ears of the band, the crowd, and even himself in a way that was almost overwhelming. He stopped for a brief second, stunned by what he had just played, and then continued, letting the melody expand and grow. The pianist's eyes widened in surprise. He stopped giving guidance for a moment, letting the boy take full control. The drummer paused his beat to listen, then added a soft, perfect rhythm to support the melody. The guitarist followed, matching the boy's music with simple chords that enhanced the tune without overpowering it. Together they created a magical moment, but the boy was at the center, leading, creating, expressing something that felt larger than life. The crowd was spellbound. Children clapped quietly at first, then more confidently. Some adults whispered to each other, their faces lighting up in amazement. No one moved, no one talked. They simply listened, captivated by the music pouring from a 12-year-old boy. It was not just the notes. It was the courage, the passion, the raw emotion that made every sound matter. The boy felt tears prick his eyes, not from sadness, but from joy, from disbelief, from the overwhelming feeling that he was doing something extraordinary. He had dreamed of this moment for years, and now it was real. He was creating music that mattered, music that connected with people, music that told a story without words. Each note was a piece of his heart, and it was reaching everyone around him. He continued to play, experimenting with variations, adding soft pauses here and there, speeding up or slowing down when it felt right. The piano seemed alive under his hands, responding to every touch, every intention. He felt completely immersed, as if he and the piano were one. Every sound was deliberate yet effortless, a perfect balance between thought and feeling. The band members watched in awe. The pianist's eyes glimmered with pride, the drummer's steady beat seemed to smile with the melody, and the guitarist's chords added warmth and depth to the boy's creation. They had seen many musicians, but few had the courage, instinct, and emotional honesty of this child. It was rare, almost miraculous, to witness. The crowd began to cheer softly, then louder. Applause broke out as the boy reached the climax of his melody, a series of notes that seemed impossible to play with such precision and feeling. He looked up briefly, and the eyes of the audience, the band, and even the children around him reflected admiration, wonder, and joy. He felt a warmth spread through him, a mix of pride, happiness, and disbelief. The boy played on, letting the music flow without thinking, without stopping, until the melody reached its gentle conclusion. He lifted his hands from the keys and sat back, breathing heavily, a wide smile spreading across his face. The piano's sound lingered in the air, soft and magical, as if reluctant to end the moment. For a long second, there was silence. Then the applause erupted. Children clapped and cheered, adults stood and clapped, and the band members joined in, some whistling in admiration. The boy's heart swelled. He had done it. He had turned his dream into reality. A 12-year-old boy from a small village had created music that touched hearts, music that made people stop and feel. The pianist stepped forward and knelt down to his level. "That was incredible," he said softly. "You have a gift.
Keep playing, keep dreaming.
And don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The boy nodded, unable to speak at first, overwhelmed by the praise and the moment. The drummer gave a cheerful smile and tapped the boy on the shoulder. "You've got courage, and courage matters as much as skill. Remember that." The guitarist smiled warmly, giving him a thumbs up. "Keep at it," he said. "You're amazing." The boy looked out at the crowd. The faces of people he had known all his life were glowing with admiration. Children were staring at him with wide eyes, hoping that one day they could be brave like him. Adults whispered to each other, amazed that such talent and courage could come from someone so young. It was a moment he would never forget. He realized that this wasn't just about playing the piano. It was about courage, about daring to ask, about daring to try when others might have said no. It was about believing in himself even when everything seemed impossible, and in that moment he felt a deep sense of purpose. Music wasn't just a dream anymore. It was part of who he was. As the applause died down, the boy remained at the piano, smiling quietly. The band members stood around him, proud and supportive. He had learned something important that evening. Talent could take you far, but courage and heart could take you even further. He had dared to step forward, to ask for a chance, and it had changed everything. The sun had long set, leaving the village bathed in the soft glow of festival lights. The boy finally rose from the piano bench, still smiling, still feeling the rush of what had just happened. The band patted him on the back, the crowd whispered praises, and he felt something that he would carry for the rest of his life. A sense of accomplishment, joy and belonging. Walking home that night under the stars, he could still hear the melody in his mind, the sound of the piano, the rhythm of the drummer, the chords of the guitarist. He realized that music was more than notes. It was courage, heart, and connection. And in that magical moment, he had experienced all three. The boy's dream had come alive, and he knew this was only the beginning. There would be more songs, more melodies, more chances to play and share music. But that night he had discovered something even more important: the power of belief, the strength of courage, and the beauty of daring to try. And as he walked through the quiet streets of his village, a small smile on his face, he knew that the magic of that evening would stay with him forever. He had touched something rare, something unforgettable, something that no one could ever take away from him. The boy walked away from the piano that night with a feeling he had never known before. His fingers still tingled from playing, his heart still raced, and his mind was full of the melody he had created. The applause, the cheers, the smiles, they all stayed with him, echoing in his chest like a warm rhythm. He had dared to try, and the world had responded with wonder and encouragement. It was a feeling that would stay with him forever. Back in his small home, he told his parents everything. He explained how he had approached the band, how he had hesitated, how he had finally played and discovered the music inside him. His parents listened, eyes wide, hearts swelling with pride. They had always known he was special, always known that he had dreams bigger than their village, but seeing him in action, seeing the joy on his face, made it real. They hugged him tightly, telling him that this was only the beginning, that nothing could stop him if he continued to believe in himself.